Good morning. My name is Eric Eversole. I'm the president of Hiring Our Heroes, and I am so glad that you could join us this morning for Motivational Mondays. As many of you know, as we got into the current coronavirus epidemic and we had to move away from a lot of our work directly physically on military installations, our team, our amazing team, quickly stood up this virtual community career platform to really bring a full range of content to help transitioning service members, family members, veterans to really think about how they transition during this current environment. What are some tips and tools? How do they keep focused on that goal of getting that career opportunity that they so richly deserve? And so today is, as many of you know, in our 7th week now, is Motivational Monday. We are really honored to have our partners at Toyota help bring us this content. They have been our partners since the early part of 2011 when we kicked off our efforts and have been great partners since then. So special thanks to Toyota for helping to leverage this opportunity. But we have a wonderful speaker and friend today who's going to kick off our Motivational Monday. Carol Eggert is someone who, from my perspective, is one of those unique speakers who brings a great deal of perspective on a lot of various topics that are facing a lot of service members and their family members now. First and foremost, Carol is a retired brigadier general from the Army, but I think one of the things that she would tell you, and certainly has given her a unique perspective, is that she started out her military career as an enlisted soldier, and that perspective, I had that same perspective. I started out as a senior airman in the Air National Guard. That unique perspective really shapes and forms the way you lead. And certainly as a military leader, Carol had a distinguished career in the Army and leveraged that skill set to then take it to the civilian sector, where she's now the senior vice president and runs the military and veterans affairs programs for Comcast NBC Universal. So we are honored today to have Carol with us, great friend, great leader, and certainly want to hear her unique perspectives on job search, what to think about, and then the overall leadership perspective about the skill sets that really make our military members so well equipped to deal with this current crisis. So Carol, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Eric, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I really admire what you've done and how you've pivoted so quickly to the virtual world and without a misstep, and continuing to bring these great services to the military community. So I want to thank you and your team for doing this. When I first learned about it, I thought that is the coolest thing ever. So great job, great job. And that's one of the things we talk about is how to pivot, and you guys didn't waste any time pivoting. So, hey folks, it's nice to be here with all of you. And Eric asked me to speak about leading through these challenging times. And he just mentioned your job search and your transition and how to keep that going. I'm going to back up a little bit more to the foundational elements of anything you want to do. At another time, I'll be glad to give you specifics for your job search, although I will recommend keep being active in your job search. Now is not the time to slow down. But I do want to speak about some things to get yourself ready when these things open up and for these challenging times. And remember, tough times don't last, tough people do. And I'm sure speaking to this audience, you already know that. So let's take a look at some of the elements of leading through challenging times. And I'm going to start with, you have to lead yourself. Self-leadership is critical. You can't lead others. You can't do what you want to do unless you can lead yourself. And that is not easy. I mentioned find your equilibrium. When we're all thrown into new situations, we feel off balance. And it's important to figure out what you need to do to start that balance, to regain your balance. Now, for some people, it's ensuring you're connected to your family. For others, ensuring that you can still do the physical fitness things you were able to do. For others, it's important that you can still learn. So when you're removed out of your comfortable situation, you have to figure out how to get your bearings, how to get your sea legs for all the Navy folks out there. I want to talk a little bit about self-leadership and leading through tough times. And so, as I said, the first thing is making sure you can, in fact, lead yourself. So a couple of things I want to touch on. There's 4 pillars of self-leadership. And now's a good time to take an inventory of where you are with that. So the 4 pillars. The first is self-discovery. Take the time now. If we can go back to the 4 pillars of leadership, let's just talk about that a little bit. Self-discovery. Most of us as leaders think about external circumstances and working with people on our team without taking the time to reflect on where we are individually. And studies have shown that if you spend time on yourself, you're a much better leader. And they've also shown that leaders don't do this. They don't give themselves the time to reflect, to determine where they want to be, to figure out who they are. So that's why self-discovery is important. We get so busy and doing what we're doing. But this time has thrown us into a new situation, so we could reevaluate that and think about who we are and where we want to go. So think about self-discovery, and then also self-acceptance. This is a tough one now, and I've had some folks tell me this. You know, I'm feeling guilty that I'm not getting as much done as I'd like to do. I've just saved myself over 3 hours of commute time. So when this started, I said, oh, I'm going to do all sorts of things with that extra 3 hours a day. Well, it's a lot tougher than you think it is. I said I would get up every day and exercise because that's what I complained about with my commute. It's not easy to tell you I haven't done it more than twice, but I'm still working on it. So be easy on yourself. I mentioned that to a couple folks and they said, Carol, just give yourself some leeway. But I think 7 weeks is plenty of leeway. So if I'm going to do this, I better sure as heck do it. So self-acceptance, understanding what the situation is. Don't sabotage yourself. Don't engage in self-criticism. You know, you didn't get the resume done. You didn't submit the 30 applications you said you would submit. Keep in mind you're with your families. You're in very difficult times, very unusual times. So try not to beat yourself up. And many of us in the military are obsessed with perfectionism. We often don't do things because we feel that what we're doing isn't perfect, so therefore we just don't do it. That's certainly a challenge I have. Not that I ever reach perfection, but I do delay as I try to. So keep in mind that action is better than no action, and getting something done, even if it isn't perfect, is very important. So self-acceptance, being easy on yourself based on what's going on in the world around you. And that leads us to self-management, which is not easy. So leaders who can self-manage are able to lead their teams. And if they can't self-manage, they can't be focused, they can't work independently, they aren't self-disciplined. You cause your team stress and firefighting. You just create havoc. But I want to mention that self-management and self-discipline isn't about pushing yourself. It's about being smart. And I want to share a book with you. I just picked this up. I thought it looked very interesting. This is called, can we see this, Eric? Oh, here it is. Tough to see. All right, tough to see in the background. Tiny changes, remarkable results, atomic habits. Now, the principle of this book is don't focus on your goal, focus on the process that gets you there. The goal is the outcome. The process is what really takes the focus. So let's just say you want to, give me a tough one. You want to, well, everybody talks about exercise. So you want to get well and fitness. So don't focus on that goal. Focus on what it takes to get there. And in very small, minute changes, you can, in fact, get to monumental changes, but not unless you analyze the simple changes. So for exercise, it's something as simple as buy yourself a new pair of running shoes, set the alarm for 5:30, and focus on and celebrate the completion of the process. So I think this is a great book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, good name. So self-management. Now let's go to the fourth one, self-growth. Now's a great time to focus on that. The U.S. Chamber has done, Hiring Our Heroes has done some great stuff, pulling together resources for all of us in transition. You know, there's Spark, there's all the tools out of the Syracuse University. One thing is project management certification. That can't hurt anybody to have that. So look at the resources that are available to you and figure out what you can do with this time to build your growth. It never ends. And we've all been in the military. And we've been tested. We get PT tests, we get all of our knowledge tests. It's just one step after the other. But can we do that when we're no longer in the military? Do we have the self-motivation to continue that continuous improvement? But now's a good time to think about your job search, your next steps, and invest in yourself. So strong believer in self-growth, and that makes you accountable to continuous improvement. And also then it can set the standards for your team. If your team sees that you're investing in yourself, they'll feel comfortable investing in themselves. I think professional development is critical. So I hope that helps you with self-leadership, and that you can't go down the path unless, in fact, you do invest in yourself and use this time to do that. I want to focus now on one element of self-leadership. I just mentioned many, but one element I think has led me and supported me through many, many years, 34 years in the military as well as in the civilian sector. So let's talk about resiliency. So, you know, you've got the academic definition of resiliency, but it's not something that you have or don't have. You can develop resiliency. And you might think you don't need it unless you're in tough times, you're in battle, but we need it all the time. And no one can judge what situation requires resiliency. That is totally personal and up to you. What throws you? You know, this time may throw you in that you're anxious, you're worried about your family, you have people involved in the medical field, and you're concerned about bringing that home. No one can judge and say, well, I've been in tougher situations than you've been in, and I didn't have any problem. That will get you nowhere. So even your job search and being in transition, we have to be resilient. Think about all the times you've applied for jobs and didn't even get an answer back. You definitely have to be resilient to get up and start over. I'm going to have a sip of coffee here. I hope you all have your coffee with you. So look at the definition: the ability to withstand, recover, and grow in the face of stressors. I think that's the important word, to grow, so that tough situations enhance us, they don't diminish us. But only if we look at it that way, and take advantage isn't quite the word I'm looking for, but use that opportunity to grow, to build resilient habits. So in the face of these kind of stressors and changing demands, would you all agree that we're in the middle of changing demands and we have to figure out where to go next? Well, you can see here in this graphic, I think it's great. Either you bounce back or you crack. And I also think we can't judge those who crack because it's tough, but we can build some of the skills for resilience. So I want to talk about that now, and I want to share some examples of people I have found to be very resilient. When I was in Iraq, I was in an attack, and it was on one of the MRAPs, and it was like the bus. I didn't know anybody on it, but if we could take a look at that, here's a picture of that, and we're well beyond battle damage assessment, so I'm not violating any kind of classified information, but you can take a look at this. If you look at the bottom of the hull, you can see a blast going right through that. You can see the windows were all, you can see another blast coming through the windows. It was totally disabled immediately upon the attack. And in the MRAP, there were 8 of us. As we said, it was like a bus. Nobody knew each other. Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. Look what it did to the tires. No wonder we stopped. Couldn't go anywhere. And then of course you're always worried as soon as you get out to recover, that's when you have the issues of ambush. I wouldn't say I handled it very well, in that I just figured it was no big deal. This is what happened. So I think that's really not handling it. That's just ignoring the situation. But I want to share with you some people who I really respect who were in that MRAP that day, and who in fact have shown great characteristics of resilience and continue to today. And you all know, when things happen in the military, you stay very connected to those who shared a traumatic or very serious incident. So let's take a look at some of these folks. All right, so we've got Captain Maureen Wood. These folks here were so very young, 25 maybe, in the Air Force. She was a trial lawyer for the high value captives. And she was injured in the attack. Here's a picture of her smiling after the voting. She had a tough time initially. She didn't share it with her family. She just kept to herself, but she did get through it. So I reached out to these folks and asked them to share some of their advice on how to get through these kind of things. And by the way, I'm using a combat example, but this is any traumatic event, and what you do. So I'd love some of her recommendations. You have to talk to people. And she had a tough time doing that initially, but she did come through and did start sharing with folks. And be willing to take advice. Or let's just say you don't have to be willing to take advice. Be willing to hear advice. That's a start. And as we all heard, when we're in tough times, don't try to power through. I would say that's probably what I did by not even acknowledging the situation. So engage in and take advantage of the support structure that's around you. Now, it's tough to do this, but be willing to work at getting better, and don't focus on a sob story. Don't wallow in your situation. So you might be saying with a job search, I can't get a job, they never answer my applications, and you can get really pulled down by that. And I love this. You have a choice to be a victim or a victor. So think about that. And when you're in tough times, don't let career advancement or what other people think, um, or what your family might think get in the way. Your well-being is worth more than anything else. So always put yourself first, which is what I just said with self-leadership. You've got to take care of yourself first. And then you have to give back. We all have the responsibility to give back and to share. So those of you that are in transition or have jobs, let's make sure we're helping others. We're giving a hand up. Um, one of the, I love this, one of the easiest ways to be happy is to help others. So invest in others. And if you experience something that worked really well, if you know of job openings, please share. And I think that's what Hiring Our Heroes allows us to do. Let's take a look at another person here. Now, Randy Klingensmith was injured very seriously. He was a contracting officer who happened to be in the MRAP that day. Severely injured, almost lost his legs, really had a tough time. So was totally disabled. And so you could imagine what he had to go through to bring himself back. Look at that family. I think they must have spent 6 months at one of the Fisher houses as he tried to rehab. And he has some great advice, and much of it centers on knowing yourself. He really stresses invest in your physical capabilities within your limits. Don't give up. Your body is a tool and you need to keep it sharp. So real focus on getting fit and all the work it takes to come back. And I think that's good advice for any of us, that wellness and physical fitness is a tool to help us be resilient. So I think that was really good advice. Learn the signs of where you are. Once again, this is self-discovery. What are you going through? What's going to set you off anxiety-wise? And be aware of your center. Where are you at this point? And how do you get to where you want to be? And you can imagine, this isn't easy. We just had Ryan on. And, you know, we all know people who have really gone through some tough times. And I find them to be so inspirational. Think of Brad Snyder and what he went through, Fire in My Eyes, his book. So when you're having a tough time, think about other folks and how they brought themselves back. And you won't ever do it without your friends and family. And keep in mind that life doesn't end just because you take off the uniform. And you could imagine if you suddenly were no longer in the military, that can be a really tough thing to accept with a medical discharge. But I think considering what he's gone through and what he got himself through, it's a great inspiration. And I want to share one more really special person. And this is Captain Wendy Buckingham. She's a lawyer also, Air Force lawyer. She just about lost her legs. She had a fractured tibia and part of her femur. She was in rehab for over a year. So if you could imagine what that takes. Her family moved down to be with her in Texas. But what kind of perseverance that takes. So we have so many examples of this in the military. You know, you say, well, what choice do you have? Well, you actually have lots of choices of not bringing yourself back. But you can see here in these pictures, she did that. She is now a lawyer in Philadelphia. She has 2 children. She's married to a former Air Force pilot. So you can see that she put her life back together after suffering some very tough situations. And I admire her. I think some of you have heard the story that when we were in the trauma clinic, I said to her, and I didn't know her, I said to her, "You will walk again, and you're going to invite me to your wedding." And she did, even though we did not know each other. And I went to Texas for her wedding, and what a great end to the story to see her walk down that aisle. So find your inspiration in people. Make a list of those people who inspire you. And then my last example is my nephew. I can't believe what he's been through. He's had over 8 tours in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, in Iraq, all throughout his career. He has an ARCOM with a Valor device. And, you know, he's a tough guy. He's a Bradley team chief. He's now retired and out of the military. And on one of those deployments, he lost, his wife was pregnant and had a miscarriage of their only child. So imagine going through that and keeping your faith up and continuing. And what amazes me about him, Jason Barrett, is that he's a tough guy, but the advice he gave me was so sort of corny and what many of you would say, well, that's silly, but he actually said that it really makes a difference. It's hunt the good stuff, which many of you who've been in the Army know that that's part of the resiliency training. And I said, really, Jason? I heard about it, but I don't even know what it means. And he turned me on to that whole concept of hunting the good stuff. And he says that it can help cut through the crap that life throws at you. And you can see that things aren't as bad as you thought they might be. And I love this in perspective. 90% of people accept more danger driving to work than any other danger they'll face. I don't know if that makes me feel more comfortable or less comfortable. But let's take a look at this concept of hunting the good stuff. All right, if you're familiar with Comprehensive Soldier Fitness, Building Resilience, it's a great tool, and all that is available to you. So just look it up, Master Resilience, and some great skills you can learn, but I'm just going to focus on one, and that's hunting the good stuff. So what does that even mean? But I would recommend you all explore this. Now I better be careful saying this. Army training is very interesting, and it's not one we always recommend, but I found this to be extremely helpful. So take a look at this. Let's look at hunting the good stuff. What the heck does that even mean? Hunting the good stuff means you are actively looking for positive things in your world. Because if you look at some of the studies, in order to be prepared as humans back in the caveman days, we had to focus on the negative stuff so that we could be ready. We had to know that there were lions and dangers in the world, and we had to think about what we would do when we faced them. So most of our survival techniques were based on being aware of negative things in our environment. Well, we've progressed from that point. However, that tendency to focus on the negative so that we can be aware of the fight or flight tendency is no longer needed. There isn't very often that we in our daily lives, even here with COVID, that we have to think about what are all the dangers in our path. So let's look at how do you get out of that very automatic response by always looking at negative situations. So it doesn't come naturally. You have to actively look for the good stuff. And what's this going to do for you? It's going to give you a much more positive mindset. It's going to reduce stress. It's going to help you focus on the good things in your life, but it's not easy to do. You have to fight the idea to focus on negative. We've all worked with people where you'll say, well, here's an idea I have, and they'll immediately go into all the negative things about that idea. Learned a great thing in improv where you don't say yes, but you say yes, and. Yes, and we could also think about this. So focus on positive things and not being negative. So for instance, you sent out 10 resumes. You didn't get a job out of it, but you did get 3 responses. Focus on that and think about what caused that to happen. It builds great positive emotions. Now, I would say people are either positive or negative, but you can make yourself a positive person. I like to think that I am. And I think time in Iraq certainly pushed me to that. I realized just how much we all have to be grateful for and how many good things there are in this world. But you gotta look for it. My daughter and I have a little game that we play where when we see something positive, when we see a child that's having an incredible time with her parents or his parents, we'll say, baby alert, and we'll look over. I'm sure I'm going to get arrested someday because I'm always looking at children and how positive they are and their good experiences. Now, am I Pollyanna? I know there's plenty of negative experiences around children, and it's not that I'm blocking all that out, but I like to focus on the positive. And that's what helps us create resilience, which helps us get through these tough times. So let's look at some techniques to do that. Now that we know it really will help us, let's take a look at what we need to do. So we need to focus on gratitude. And you're all going to say, I've heard all these platitudes forever, but that's not the same as really doing it. Wake up every morning and think about what you're grateful for. And remember, this is Jason, who had 8 tours of duty, is the one that taught me this. So obviously it works if somebody like that is going to go ahead and recommend this as a way to build your resilience. So gratitude is important. Think about what you're grateful for. Right now, what are we grateful for? I'm grateful that I'm not commuting 3 hours a day. I'm grateful that I get to spend more time with my family actually through Zoom. I'm grateful that I have a company that is keeping us all employed. Am I aware that there are so many people suffering? I'm grateful that I can help with that and respond by donating to COVID aid or by contributing to our food bank or by giving blood. So this is not keep your head in the sand when you think about being grateful. Now, here's some tips for how you'd be grateful. We have to look at good things. If we could take a look at that, good things can still happen in the midst of chaos. All you have to do is look at some of the great examples on the news of people who are helping. Remember in Italy when they all were singing? So you have to look around for that, and you can't use the chaos and the tragedy to keep you from focusing on the good things or even creating the good things. It's important to give back, and that will certainly help you be more grateful. So look around, be open to it, watch people. I love to watch people doing good things for other people. Picking up something that somebody dropped, helping someone with their groceries. I'll note that. I'll try to do it myself, but I will note it when I see other people doing it. So give back. Our boss once said, and I love this, is that we're looking to hire people whose ego is um, enriched by giving back, not by what they can accomplish themselves. So enriched by helping others succeed. And you can kind of tell the difference in those types of people. All right, how many of you are wondering what the heck forest bathing is? Well, this is a concept in Japan, and what it means is make sure you take time to get into nature. Japan has studied this and shown that it reduces blood pressure, it reduces heart disease, it increases wellness and optimism. So take time to get into nature and just enjoy it and focus on it and look at it. Don't go out there just to run 6 miles. Take some time just to sit and listen to the birds. And that's what I mean by staying silent. I have a tough time doing that, but I have found that if you take some time to do that, it really does help. One last thing here on hunting the good stuff. And you're going to probably tell me this is corny too, but take a look at the idea of having a good stuff journal. Let's look at that next one. What do we have to do here? So this is the Army recommending this. Record 3 good things each day. I once had a commander who in our staff meetings, we had to do 3 ups and 3 downs. And I changed that to 3 ups and 2 downs, a little more positive. But what good was there? Notice how in many of our meetings, we focus on what went wrong, not what went right. And that does not create an environment of positivity, collaboration. So I wonder how many of you would actually try this, but try to take a moment to write down 3 good things that happened to you that day. I used to do this with my children, and sometimes they would come up with, they counted 1 as no bad things happened to me. You know, they always tried to get out of it, but take a moment to do that. All right, so that's hunting the good stuff. Now, since I did say I would talk to you about leadership in challenging times, how many of you know the term VUCA? I love this term. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Would you agree that we are definitely in VUCA environment right now? So after you've built yourself and invested in yourself, then you're ready to lead through turbulent times. What does that mean? Well, there's some great research done on this. And this particular researcher took VUCA and built leadership traits around that. So in order to survive in VUCA environment, you have to have vision. You have to share vision with your team. If you can't picture how we're going to get out of this, certainly the team can't. So you've got to pull everyone together and be the compass. Have the vision. Forge the next identity. That's why people keep asking, when are we going back to normal? What's the next normal? Everybody's dying to understand what's coming at us. And as a leader, you have to help guide that and paint that picture. And not the large picture for the country, but the small picture for your team. What are we looking at next? You have to build understanding. You have to be transparent. You have to reflect on the situation that we're in. And you also have to empathize with what people are going through. Think about how tough this is for many people. Their kids are home. They're trying to work. They may have COVID themselves or someone in their family. Their technology might not be working. You've got to be empathetic and not just focus on what work needs to be done. So as the leader, be transparent on the situation. Where are we going? Embrace the behaviors that we can put into place now, and be empathetic to anxiety and uncertainty. Clarity. So in VUCA, that's complexity. So in clarity, we have to break down the very complex and make it more clear. What are we really dealing with? That's the only way to build trust as a leader. Be transparent, acknowledge what we don't know, acknowledge what may be happening. Be sure to say this may be happening. Don't be saying things you don't know. And bring that transparency and that clarity to your team. And I think there's no doubt that we need to be adaptable and agility. I mentioned it to Eric, the way they pivoted to a virtual world. I think it must have taken Eric, 2 weeks in order to do that? So we have to analyze the new situation, determine what we need to do to address the changing situation, and then adapt and pivot and be transparent with your team and encourage innovation in these unusual times. So that's going to wrap it up for me. I think if we focus on what I said, it's self-leadership is critical. We're not going to lead others if we can't manage ourselves. And there are some pillars in self-leadership to focus on. And then I shared with you some examples of resiliency and some tips to get through tough times. So think about and explore the Army's resiliency program. There's some great tips there. And then what are some of the challenges of leading through these tough times?
I can't thank you enough for that discussion, and really, the mix of both real world examples and kind of the high level leadership was really the best we've had. And so thank you for doing that.